the bagpipes. The missing link between music and noise. Well, for years now, Scottish people have been living with the stereotype that they're a cheap people. We're here today to dismiss this stereotype. Why do you suppose Scottish people get the reputation of being cheap?
Cheap, eh? Well, let me see now. I have to compare that because I've heard the Dutch are cheaper.
Nah, cheap, just frugal.
No, I'm looking at you thinking you and I could be an item. If I was in the back seat of a taxi with you, I'd have a tough time keeping my eye on the bloody meter. You can't deny there's cheap Scots out there. I mean, I went over to my mother-in-law's house and she was taking the wallpaper down and I asked, what, are you redecorating? She goes, no, we're moving at the end of the month.
All right.
What part of Scotland are you from, Jack?
Argyle.
Argyle?
Yep.
The same with the sweaters and the socks.
More or less, yeah.
You know how many Christmases were ruined when I opened a box to get Argyle bloody socks?
Where did you learn to speak like that?
Yeah, Scottish people are not cheap. We're just thrifty.
Thrifty. What have you got here, Sharon?
Highland nutcrackers.
Nutcrackers?
Yes.
That reminds me of a story when I was in the north of Scotland. We were arguing with a neighbour, arguing over some land. 2 acres of land. And anyway, I settled out of court. I ended up kicking him between the legs and saying, there's a couple acres for you. Talk about your Highland nutcracker.
Thrifty.
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 You've been drinking too bloody much whiskey, or not enough, whichever the case may be.
There is a God. I understand this is your third time in the tent.
Yeah.
You see, they call him the exorcist. Everywhere he goes, spirits bloody disappear. Why do you suppose the rest of the world views Scotland as a cheap people? Why is that?
Well, it's a rumour, of course, that's all. Nothing more than that. Why do you think?
Well, I mean, I've been to Scotland and I've seen forks in the sugar bowls. I mean, come on, let's face it.
Well, sugar's scarce in Scotland, you see.
So what are you wearing under your kilt?
How warm's your hands?
I can warm them for you.
Well, that about wraps up our day at the BC Highland Games here in Coquitlam. We've had a great time, drank some whiskey, met some nice people, and the consensus about the Scottish stereotype that they're all cheap, rubbish. Turns out they're just thrifty. What? Oh, sorry. This just in. 27 Scotsmen have been taken to hospital after a collision between 2 taxis. More details to follow. We are cheap.